The spring gathering always brought out the worst in people. Sarah stood at the edge of the ceremonial circle, fingers twisted in the worn fabric of her skirt as the entire Clearwater pack assembled under ancient oaks. Lanterns hung from every branch, casting dancing shadows across hundreds of expectant faces. The air smelled of pine smoke and wild honey, but beneath it lurked something sharper, anticipation thick enough to taste. Another mating ceremony, her friend Kira whispered. Third one this month. The elders are really pushing for bonds this year. Sarah's stomach churned. At 22, she was one of the oldest unbonded females in the pack. Whispers followed her everywhere. Unnatural, broken, wrong. The crowd parted as Elder Thomas took his place at the circle's center, silver hair gleaming in firelight. "We gather under the moon's witness," he intoned, voice carrying across the clearing, "to honor the sacred bonds that strengthen our pack." Sarah's heart hammered. Not tonight. Please, not tonight. But Thomas's pale eyes found hers across the crowd. "Sarah Blackwood, step forward." The world tilted. Around her, pack members whispered and pointed. She could feel their judgment like needles against her skin. "Move," Kira hissed, giving her a gentle push. "You're making it worse." Sarah forced her legs to carry her into the circle, though they trembled with each step. The packed earth felt strange beneath her feet, as if it might open and swallow her whole. She prayed it would. "You have been summoned to accept your fated mate," Thomas continued, "as revealed by the moon goddess herself." He paused dramatically. "Cassian Thorne, step forward." The crowd erupted in approving murmurs as Cassian emerged from the opposite side. He was handsome in a brutal sort of way, all sharp angles and predatory grace. Dark hair fell across his forehead, amber eyes gleaming with triumph as they locked onto Sarah. She'd known Cassian her entire life, Beta's son, third in line for pack leadership. Powerful, respected, everything a good match should be, and absolutely wrong. "The signs have been read," Thomas announced. "The moon's blessing confirmed. Cassian Thorne is your fated mate, Sarah Blackwood. Do you accept this bond?" Cassian moved toward her with confident strides, smile playing at his lips. When he reached her, he extended his hand palm up in the traditional gesture of claiming. Up close, she could smell his scent, cedar and smoke, and something metallic that made her wolf recoil. "Say yes," he murmured, too low for others to hear. "Don't embarrass us both." Sarah stared at his outstretched hand. Her wolf, usually so quiet within her, was suddenly thrashing. "Wrong, wrong, wrong," it howled. "Not him. Never him." "Sarah?" Thomas's voice held a warning edge. She lifted her gaze to Cassian's face and saw the expectation there. The assumption that she would fall in line like every other female. That she would be grateful. Something inside her snapped. No. The word fell into the clearing like a stone into still water. For a heartbeat there was perfect silence. Then chaos exploded. What did she say? Did she just refuse? How dare she? "Sarah?" Cassian's voice dropped to a growl, his hand still extended. "Take my hand." "No," she repeated, louder this time. Her voice shook, but she forced herself to meet his eyes. "I reject this bond. I reject you as my fated mate." Cassian's face went from shock to rage in an instant. He lunged forward, his hand shooting out to grab her wrist. "You ungrateful!" "She has spoken her rejection." A new voice cut through the chaos, deep and commanding enough to silence the entire gathering. Every head turned toward the tree line, where three figures emerged from shadows. Sarah's breath caught. These weren't Clearwater wolves. Their presence radiated power that made her knees weak. The one who had spoken was massive, with silver-threaded black hair and eyes that glowed amber in firelight. "Commander Riker," Elder Thomas breathed, bowing low. "We did not expect emissaries from the capital." The commander's gaze swept over the assembled pack with barely concealed contempt before settling on Sarah. The Alpha King has need of unbonded females for the selection. This one will do. Sarah's blood ran cold. The selection. Every wolf knew the rumors. Young females taken to the capital, never to return. Some said they were killed. Others whispered darker things. Commander, with respect, Thomas began carefully. This female has just rejected her fated mate. Such dishonor makes her perfect for our purposes. Riker moved into the circle with predatory grace. A wolf who defies the sacred bonds is exactly what the Alpha King seeks. You can't take her, Cassian snarled, positioning himself between Sarah and the commander. She's mine by right. She rejected you. Riker's voice was soft, dangerous. Or did I misunderstand what just occurred? Cassian's face flushed with humiliation and rage. He turned on Sarah with such venom she stumbled backward. You'll regret this. You worthless. Enough. Riker's hand shot out, catching Cassian by the throat and lifting him off his feet with terrifying ease. Show respect for a female of the capital, or I'll remove your tongue. He dropped Cassian, who collapsed, gasping in the dirt. The crowd had gone deathly silent. Riker extended his hand toward Sarah, palm up, mirroring Cassian's earlier gesture. But where Cassian's offer had been a demand, this felt like something else entirely. A lifeline. A trap. She couldn't tell which. Come willingly, Riker said, his amber eyes boring into hers. Or I'll take you by force. Either way, you leave tonight. Sarah's mind raced. Behind her, she could hear her mother sobbing in the crowd. Cassian was climbing to his feet, murder in his eyes. The entire pack stared at her with mixtures of shock, disgust, and something that might have been envy. She thought of what her life would be if she stayed. Cassian would never forgive this public humiliation. The pack would never let her forget her rejection of a fated mate. She would be an outcast, or worse. At least at the capital, she would be somewhere new. Somewhere her past didn't define her. Sarah placed her hand in Commander Riker's. His fingers closed around hers with surprising gentleness. Wise choice. As he led her from the circle, Sarah didn't look back at her pack, her former life, or Cassian's furious face. She kept her eyes forward on the dark forest ahead, trying to ignore the way Riker's touch sent strange shivers up her arm. Behind them, Elder Thomas's voice rose in protest. At least let her say goodbye to her family, gather her belongings. No time, Riker called back. The Alpha King's orders are absolute. They reached the tree line where two more soldiers waited with horses. One of them, a stern woman with a scar across her jaw, looked Sarah up and down with obvious disappointment. This is what all the fuss was about? She's scrawny. She'll do, Riker said, lifting Sarah onto a horse with one fluid motion. He mounted behind her, arms coming around to grip the reins. Let's move. We ride through the night. As the horse lurched into motion, Sarah twisted to look back one last time. The gathering was in chaos, pack members shouting and arguing. She caught a glimpse of her mother's tear-stained face before the forest swallowed them whole. Where are you taking me? Sarah asked, her voice barely audible over pounding hooves. To the capital, Riker answered. To meet your new alpha. And then what? She felt rather than saw his grim smile. That depends entirely on whether you survive the selection. They rode in silence for what felt like hours, the forest blurring past in shadows of black and silver. Sarah's entire body ached from the unfamiliar position, pressed against Commander Riker's chest with his arms caging her on either side. She tried to maintain some distance, but every jolt of the horse's gait threw her back against him. Relax, Riker said eventually, his voice rumbling through his chest into her back. You'll fall if you keep fighting the rhythm. I'm fine. You're about to crack your skull open. His arm tightened around her waist, pulling her more firmly against him. Lean back. I won't drop you. Sarah had no choice but to comply, her body finally settling into the horse's movement. The warmth radiating from Riker was oddly comforting despite her fear. She hated how safe she felt with his arm around her. Why me? She finally asked after another mile passed. There must be dozens of unbonded females. Why come all that way for one rejection ceremony? Riker was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because you did something tonight that most wolves never have the courage to do. You chose yourself over the pack's expectations. I dishonored my pack, rejected my fated mate. That's not courage. It's selfishness. Is it? She could hear the smile in his voice. Or is it the only honest thing you've ever done? The words hit too close to home. Sarah bit her lip, determined not to cry in front of this stranger. They crested a hill, and suddenly the forest opened to reveal a vast valley below. In the distance, impossibly large, rose the walls of a city that glowed with thousands of lights. Sarah had never seen anything like it. Clearwater was barely 50 houses clustered around a central square. This was something from Legends. The capital, Riker announced, heart of the Alpha King's territory. How many people live there? Wolves? About 10,000? Humans? 3 times that? He felt her stiffen in surprise. Yes, humans and wolves live side by side here. The Alpha King's laws protect both. Sarah had never seen a human before. Clearwater was isolated, traditional, and suspicious of the outside world. She suddenly realized how small her life had been, how much she didn't know. They descended into the valley as dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. The closer they got to the capital, the more nervous Sarah became. The walls were even more massive than they'd appeared from a distance, solid stone rising at least 50 feet high, with watchtowers every 100 yards. Guards at the main gate saluted sharply as they approached. Commander Riker, you're back early. The Alpha King will want to know immediately, Riker said. Is he at the palace? Training grounds, sir. Been there since before dawn? Riker cursed under his breath. Of course he has. They passed through the gates into streets that made Sarah's head spin. Buildings 3 and 4 stories tall lined cobblestone roads. Even at this early hour, people moved about. Mostly humans, she realized with shock. They didn't cower or hide. They walked with purpose, many carrying tools or goods, clearly heading to work. Humans aren't servants here? She whispered. They're citizens, Riker corrected. With full rights under the Alpha King's law. Anyone who harms a human faces the same punishment as harming a wolf. This was so far beyond anything Sarah had been taught that her mind struggled to process it. In Clearwater, humans were spoken of like dangerous animals to be avoided or myths to frighten children. They wound through increasingly grand streets until they reached a sprawling complex of buildings dominated by an enormous palace. But Riker steered them past the ornate main entrance toward a large open area behind it. The training grounds. Even from a distance, Sarah could hear the clash of weapons and shouted commands. Dozens of wolves fought in organized chaos, some in human form with swords and staffs. Others shifted into wolf forms, engaged in primal combat. And in the center of it all, a figure that made everyone else look like shadows by comparison. He was tall, taller than any wolf Sarah had ever seen, with shoulder-length black hair tied back from a face that could have been carved from granite. Bare-chested except for training pants, his torso was covered in a network of scars that spoke of countless battles. As they approached, he disarmed his opponent with a move so fast Sarah barely saw it, sending the other wolf sprawling in the dirt. Again, he commanded, his voice carrying across the grounds with absolute authority. My lord, Riker called out, I've returned. The tall wolf's head snapped toward them, and Sarah's breath caught. His eyes were unlike any she'd ever seen. Brilliant gold, brighter than normal amber, burning with an intensity that seemed almost supernatural. When those eyes locked onto hers, Sarah felt a jolt run through her entire body like lightning. Her wolf, silent for the entire journey, suddenly surged forward with shocking intensity. Mine, it howled. Mine. No, that was impossible. You only got one fated mate and she'd already rejected hers. The Alpha King went completely still. His nostrils flared, and she saw his entire body tense as if preparing for an attack. They simply stared at each other across the training ground, the world narrowing to just the two of them. Then his expression hardened into something cold and furious. You brought me this? His voice was dangerously quiet. Her? Riker dismounted and helped Sarah down, though her legs nearly gave out when her feet hit the ground. My lord. She rejected her fated mate in front of her entire pack. She fits the criteria. Get her out of my sight. The words were like a physical blow. Sarah watched the Alpha King turn his back on her dismissively and stride toward another opponent, as if she were beneath his notice. But my lord, the selection is postponed. He didn't look back. Take her to the holding cells with the others. Sarah's confusion must have shown on her face, because the scarred female warrior who'd accompanied them, Lieutenant Kess, she'd learned during the journey, let out a bitter laugh. Congratulations, Kess said, gripping Sarah's arm hard enough to bruise. You just became the Alpha King's newest prisoner. The holding cells beneath the palace were nothing like the dungeon Sarah had imagined. They were clean, well-lit rooms with actual beds and washing facilities. More like dormitories than prisons. Still, the door locked from the outside, and 2 guards stood watch in the corridor. There are 7 of you now, Kess explained as she showed Sarah to an empty room. All unbonded females brought for the selection. You'll stay here until the Alpha King decides what to do with you. What exactly is the selection? Sarah asked. No one's actually explained it. Kess's expression was unreadable. That's for the Alpha King to tell you. If he ever bothers to see you, that is. He's been difficult lately. Before Sarah could ask what that meant, Kess left, locking the door behind her. Sarah sank onto the bed, mind spinning. Everything had happened so fast. Just hours ago, she'd been standing in that ceremonial circle, facing Cassian. Now, she was locked in the capital, having somehow offended an Alpha King she'd never met. And that moment when their eyes had met, her wolf had recognized him, had claimed him as mate. But that was impossible. The moon goddess only gave one fated mate to each wolf. She'd already rejected hers. Exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. Sarah barely managed to remove her shoes before collapsing onto the bed. She told herself she'd just rest for a moment, then try to make sense of everything. Instead, she plummeted into a sleep so deep it felt like drowning. The dream came with the force of a vision. She was running through a forest she didn't recognize. Her paws, pounding against earth. The moon hung huge and red overhead, casting everything in shades of crimson. Something pursued her, something that made her wolf's instincts scream in terror. Then she was falling, tumbling down into darkness that had no bottom. When she finally landed, she found herself in a vast throne room. The Alpha King sat on a throne of black stone, but his face was different, older, harder, with eyes that held centuries of pain. You're late, he said, though his lips didn't move. The words came directly into her mind. Late for what? For everything. He rose from the throne, moving toward her with predatory grace. You were supposed to be here years ago. Where have you been? I don't understand. His hand shot out, gripping her throat, not painfully, but firmly. His thumb brushed over her pulse point, and she felt something awaken inside her. Power. Timeless and terrible. You will, he promised, his luminous eyes boring into hers. When you wake with my mark on your skin, you'll finally understand what you are. What we both are. He leaned closer, his breath hot against her neck. She felt his teeth graze her skin, and then pain. Searing, all-consuming pain erupted from her throat, spreading through her entire body like wildfire. She tried to scream, but no sound emerged. The Alpha King's bite went deeper, and she felt something fundamental inside her shift and change. Mine, he growled against her skin. You've always been mine. Sarah jolted awake with a scream trapped in her throat. Morning light streamed through the small window, suggesting she'd slept through the entire day and night. But that wasn't what made her pulse race with terror. Her entire body burned. Every nerve felt like it was on fire, and there was a strange tingling sensation concentrated at her throat. With shaking hands, Sarah touched her neck, and felt raised skin where there had been none before. No, 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 no. She stumbled from the bed to the small mirror hanging on the wall. When she saw her reflection, the room spun. There, on the left side of her throat, was a mark. Not a bruise or a wound, but something that looked almost like a tattoo, except it seemed to pulse with faint inner light. The design was intricate, a wolf's head surrounded by what looked like runes, all rendered, in lines that shimmered between silver and black, a claiming mark. Sarah's knees gave out, and she crumpled to the floor. This was impossible. You couldn't be marked in a dream. Claiming marks only appeared when a wolf physically bit their mate during the bonding ceremony. But the evidence was literally branded into her skin. The door suddenly burst open. Kes stood in the doorway, her eyes wide with shock. How did you? She took a step back, hand moving to her weapon. Guards! Get the Alpha King, now! Wait! Sarah tried to say, but her voice came out as a croak. I don't understand what's happening. Neither do I, Kes said, and for the first time, there was something like fear in her eyes. But that mark on your neck? That's the Alpha King's personal seal, and he hasn't bonded with anyone in 3 centuries. The room tilted again. 3 centuries? What? Someone explained to me. A voice like thunder rolled through the corridor. Why I'm being summoned from a council meeting for... The Alpha King appeared in the doorway, and froze. His eyes locked onto the mark on Sarah's throat, and his face went absolutely white. She watched emotions flash across his features too quickly to track. Shock, horror, something that might have been agony, and finally, cold fury. Everyone out, he said quietly. Now. Kes and the guards scrambled to obey. Within seconds, Sarah was alone with the Alpha King, still kneeling on the floor, unable to move or speak. He entered the room slowly, like he was approaching a dangerous animal. When he reached her, he knelt down to her level, his brilliant eyes searching her face with an intensity that made her shiver. Look at me, he commanded. Sarah forced herself to meet his gaze. Who are you? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. And don't tell me you're just some unbonded female from a backwater pack. Wolves who carry marks like that don't exist anymore. They were all killed 3 centuries ago. I don't know what you're talking about, Sarah whispered. I'm nobody. Just a healer's daughter from Clearwater Pack. His hand shot out, gripping her chin and tilting her head to expose the mark more fully. She felt him tremble as his thumb traced the intricate lines. This seal, he said, his voice barely controlled, only appears on one type of wolf, the rarest, most dangerous type. His eyes met hers again, and she saw something terrifying in their depths. You're a moon witch, the first one born in 3 centuries. That's not possible. And yet you bear my mark? He released her chin, standing abruptly and pacing away. A mark that appeared not from my physical touch, but from our bond recognizing itself across the veil of dreams. This happens only with true mates. Not the fated mates the moon goddess assigns, but something older. something that transcends the normal bonds. Sarah's world fractured completely. No, that can't be. I already rejected my fated mate. You can't have two. You can. When your first mate was wrong. He turned to face her, and the anguish in his expression took her breath away. The moon goddess makes mistakes, Sarah Blackwood, and when she does, true mates find each other despite every law that says they shouldn't exist. He moved toward her again, kneeling so they were eye to eye. So here's what's going to happen, he said, his voice soft but absolutely firm. You're going to tell me everything about yourself, every strange thing that's ever happened, every power you've ever felt, every reason your pack might have called you different or wrong. And then I'm going to figure out how to break this bond before it kills us both. Break it? Despite everything, the words stung. You don't want... Want? A harsh laugh escaped him. What I want doesn't matter. True mate bonds between alpha kings and moon witches always end the same way. In death, destruction, and entire packs burning to ash. His hand came up to cup her cheek with devastating gentleness. I've lived for 347 years, Sarah. I've survived wars, plagues, and the extinction of my entire bloodline. I will not let history repeat itself. His thumb brushed over her lips, and despite the fear coursing through her, Sarah felt heat bloom in her core. Even if it means, he continued, his eyes blazing with emotion, rejecting the only thing I've wanted for centuries, a mate of my own. Then he stood, the moment of vulnerability vanishing behind the mask of a ruler who'd seen empires rise and fall. Lieutenant Kess will move you to better quarters. You're no longer a prisoner of the selection. He moved toward the door, then paused. You're something far more dangerous. You're mine, whether either of us wants it or not. The door closed behind him, leaving Sarah alone with a burning mark on her throat and the certainty that her life would never be simple again. Sarah's new quarters were luxurious, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking sprawling gardens, rich tapestries depicting wolves running beneath various phases of the moon, a massive four-poster bed that could have fit 4 people. There was even a private bathing chamber with heated water. It felt like a gilded cage. The Alpha King wants you comfortable, Kess said, setting down a stack of fresh clothing on the bed. Though, if you ask me, comfortable prisoners are still prisoners. Sarah touched the mark on her throat, which had stopped burning but now hummed with a strange energy. He said I'm a moon witch. What does that mean? Kess's expression darkened. You really don't know? When Sarah shook her head, the lieutenant sighed. Moon witches were wolves born with the ability to manipulate lunar magic. They could heal mortal wounds, control other wolves with a thought, even alter fate itself. They were revered as priestesses and feared as weapons. Were? The last moon witch died 3 centuries ago during the War of Broken Bonds. Kess moved to the window, her scarred face, troubled. She was bonded to an Alpha King. Not our Alpha King, but his predecessor. Their power together was so immense it threatened to tear the world apart. Other packs united to destroy them both. Thousands died in the conflict. Sarah's blood ran cold. And now the Alpha King thinks I'm... Not thinks. Knows. Kess turned back to her. That mark on your throat is proof. Only a true mate bond between an Alpha King and a moon witch creates that specific seal. It's why he's so afraid. He didn't seem afraid. He seemed angry. Fear and anger look the same on a man who's lived as long as he has. Kess moved toward the door. Get cleaned up. The Alpha King wants to see you in his study at sunset. Don't be late. After Kess left, Sarah collapsed onto the bed, her mind reeling. Moon witch. True mate. Powers beyond comprehension. It was too much. Except. There had always been something different about her. Memories flooded back. The time she'd healed her mother's broken leg with just a touch, and her mother had made her swear never to tell anyone. The way she could sometimes sense other wolves' emotions like they were her own. The dreams that occasionally came true. Her mother had called it a blessing from the moon goddess. Her father had called it a curse and forbade her from ever using those abilities. In Clearwater, being different meant being dangerous. Sarah stood and moved to the bathing chamber, desperate to wash away the fear and confusion. As hot water filled the large copper tub, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. The mark seemed to glow brighter in the dim light. She traced its intricate lines with her fingertips, and a jolt of sensation shot through her. Not painful, but intense. Like recognition. Like coming home. And underneath that sensation, she felt him. The Alpha King. His presence hummed through the bond like a second heartbeat, distant but undeniable. She could sense his emotions, frustration, fear, and something else. Something that felt like longing so profound it made her chest ache. Sarah jerked her hand away from the mark, breathing hard. This bond was already more intense than anything she'd experienced with Cassian, and according to the Alpha King, it would only get stronger until it consumed them both. The Alpha King's private study was nothing like Sarah expected. Instead of the imposing throne room she'd imagined, it was a comfortable space filled with books, maps, and what looked like centuries of collected artifacts. A fire crackled in the hearth, and the Alpha King stood before it, staring into the flames. He'd changed from his training clothes into dark pants and a loose white shirt that somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. His black hair was still damp, suggesting he'd also bathed recently. "Sit," he said without turning around, gesturing to a chair near the fire. Sarah sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The mark on her throat pulsed with awareness of his proximity. "Your full name," he said. "Not just Sarah Blackwood. Your mother's bloodline. Sarah Blackwood, daughter of Elena Nightshade and Marcus Blackwood." His entire body tensed. Nightshade. "My mother's family name, yes. Why?" The Alpha King finally turned to face her, his luminous eyes intense. "Because the last Moon Witch, the one who died in the War of Broken Bonds, was named Lyanna Nightshade. And if you're her descendant, that means your power has been dormant for generations, waiting for the right circumstances to awaken." "What circumstances?" "Meeting your true mate." He moved closer, and Sarah had to force herself not to shrink back. "The bond activated your latent abilities. That's why the mark appeared. Why you can probably feel my emotions through our connection right now." Sarah's cheeks flushed. "I thought I was imagining that." "You're not." He knelt before her chair, bringing them eye to eye. "And it's going to intensify. The bond will strengthen every day we're near each other. Eventually, we won't be able to be apart without physical pain. Our thoughts will bleed together. Your power will grow until you can't control it. And then? And then, history repeats itself." His hand came up, hesitating before touching her marked throat. When his fingers made contact, they both gasped. The sensation was electric, overwhelming, like lightning racing through her veins. "We'll become so formidable that other packs will see us as a threat. They'll come for us, just like they came for Lyanna and King Darius. And this time, I won't let you die protecting me." Sarah's breath caught. "What?" Pain flashed across his features. "I was there, Sarah. 3 centuries ago, when they came for us. I wasn't the Alpha King then. I was just a commander in Darius's army. But I watched Lyanna sacrifice herself to save him, watched her power tear the world apart trying to protect her mate, and I swore I would never let that happen again. But you weren't bonded to her. How could you?" "I've lived 3 centuries because of her final spell. She poured her dying power into 30 of Darius's most loyal wolves, making us truly immortal so we could protect the packs after they were gone. We're called the Eternal Guard." His thumb traced the mark on her throat, his touch reverent. "And now, The fates have played the cruelest joke imaginable. They've given me my own moon witch to fail. Sarah's hand covered his, pressing his palm fully against the mark. The sensation made them both shudder, waves of heat and power rippling between them. What if we don't fail? What if we're strong enough? We're not. He pulled away abruptly, standing and putting distance between them. I've had 3 centuries to learn from Darius's mistakes. The bond makes you vulnerable, Sarah. Your power will grow exponentially, but so will the target on your back. Every pack that fears what a moon witch can do will unite against us. Then we fight them. With what army? His laugh was bitter. I rule the capital, yes. But my authority only extends so far. The outer packs barely tolerate my existence. If they knew a moon witch had awakened, bonded to an eternal guard who's lived long enough to be called Alpha King, he shook his head. They'd march on the capital within days. Sarah stood, anger replacing her fear. So what's your plan? Lock me away? Pretend this bond doesn't exist? My plan is to find a way to break it. He moved to his desk, pulling out a leather-bound tome. There are rituals, forbidden magic that might sever a true mate bond. It's never been done successfully. But no. The word came out with more force than Sarah intended, and she felt power ripple through the room. The flames in the hearth flared higher, and several books on nearby shelves trembled. The Alpha King's eyes widened. Sarah, you need to control. I said no. She moved toward him, her fear replaced by certainty. I've spent my entire life being told to hide what I am, to make myself smaller so others feel comfortable. I rejected a fated mate because I knew in my soul he was wrong for me. And now, you want me to reject you too? To break a bond that feels more right than anything I've ever experienced? You don't understand what you're asking? Then help me understand. The mark on her throat blazed with light now, tendrils of luminous energy crackling around her hands. Stop trying to protect me from fate and start trusting that maybe, just maybe, I'm strong enough to face it with you. They stared at each other, the air between them humming with power and possibility. Then the Alpha King crossed the distance between them in 2 strides and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, claiming 3 centuries of loneliness poured into a single moment of contact. Sarah gasped against his mouth, and his tongue swept in, tasting her fully. Her hands fisted in his shirt as he backed her against the desk, his body pressing against hers with undeniable need. The mark on her throat pulsed in time with their racing hearts, and Sarah felt his emotions flood through their bond: desire, fear, hope, anguish, all tangled together in a knot so complex she couldn't separate one from another. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. That, he said roughly, is why we can't do this. Because when I kiss you, I forget why we're supposed to stay apart. I forget everything except how much I've wanted this for 3 centuries. Then stop forgetting, Sarah whispered. Stop fighting what we both feel. You're asking me to risk your life. I'm asking you to let me make my own choices. She cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. You've lived for 347 years, but I'm the one who's actually alive right now. Don't take that away from me because you're afraid. Before he could respond, a sharp knock at the door made them spring apart. My lord, Commander Riker's voice was urgent. We have a problem. Envoys from the Clearwater Pack have arrived demanding Sarah's return, and they're not alone. They've brought representatives from 6 other packs. They're claiming she stole something that belongs to them. The Alpha King's expression hardened instantly. Tell them I'll address their concerns in the morning. My lord, they're demanding to see her tonight, and... Riker hesitated. They've brought Cassian Thorne. He's claiming the rejection was invalid because she used dark magic to manipulate the ceremony. Sarah's blood turned to ice. That's not true. It doesn't matter if it's true, the Alpha King said grimly. If 7 packs are united in their complaint, I can't simply dismiss them without evidence. We'll have to face them together. He turned to Sarah, and she saw the ruler who'd survived centuries emerge behind his eyes. This is your last chance to run. I can have Riker smuggle you out of the capital before dawn. You'll never be safe, but at least you'll be free. Sarah thought of everything that had happened in the past 2 days. The rejection, the journey, the mark, the kiss that had set her soul on fire. I'm not running, she said firmly. Not from them. Not from you. Not from what I am. The Alpha King's expression softened for just a moment. Then prepare yourself, because what happens next will determine whether we survive this bond or die by it. The great hall of the palace had been transformed into a makeshift court. 7 packs had sent representatives, and they filled the massive space with hostile energy that Sarah could feel pressing against her skin like a physical weight. She could sense their fear and disgust radiating toward her as she entered beside the Alpha King. He'd given her his name last night, whispered between them in the darkness of her quarters where he'd stayed until dawn. Kieran. 347 years old, and she was the first person to make him feel alive in centuries. Cassian stood at the front of the group, flanked by Elder Thomas and 2 wolves Sarah didn't recognize. His face twisted with satisfaction when he saw her, and she could feel his hatred burning across the space between them. Thank you for agreeing to this audience, Alpha King, Thomas said, his voice oozing false respect. We understand you have many demands on your time. Get to your point, Kieran said coldly, settling into his throne. He'd positioned a second chair beside it for Sarah, a clear statement of her status that made several wolves bristle. This female, Cassian spat the word like poison, rejected our sacred mate bond in front of witnesses. She broke the most fundamental law of our kind. She exercised her right of rejection, Kieran countered, a right guaranteed under my law. Your law doesn't extend to the outer packs, a wolf from another pack interjected. We follow the old ways. Once a fated mate is declared, rejection is impossible without consequences. What consequences? Sarah asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Cassian smiled viciously. Death or exile, those are the only punishments for such dishonor. Convenient, Commander Riker drawled from his position behind the throne. You claim tradition, but you didn't execute her. You let her leave with us. Why? Thomas shifted uncomfortably. The circumstances were unusual. The circumstances were that you were afraid, Kieran said softly, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. Afraid of what she might be, what she might become. So you were happy to let me take responsibility for her. We didn't know she was marked, another pack representative said, pointing at Sarah's throat. Didn't know she carried darkness. Darkness? Sarah stood, anger flooding through her veins. I've done nothing wrong. You bear a claiming mark that appeared without a bonding ceremony, Cassian snarled, his amber eyes blazing with fury. That's forbidden magic, corrupted magic, the kind that moon witches used before they were rightfully exterminated. The hall erupted in shouts of agreement. Sarah felt Kieran tense beside her, his power rolling off him in waves that made the air thick and hard to breathe. Careful, he said, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. You're in my territory, speaking about my mate. Choose your next words very carefully. The silence that followed was absolute. Your mate? Thomas breathed, his face going pale. You've bonded with a moon witch? The bond chose us, Kieran said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. Just as it chose Darius and Lyanna 3 centuries ago, and we all know how that story ended. Then you understand why we're here, a female wolf from the Eastern Pack said, her voice shaking slightly. History cannot repeat itself. The devastation was caused by packs like yours attacking first, Commander Riker interrupted sharply. Lyanna Nightshade never wanted war. She wanted peace. You forced her hand. She was an abomination, Cassian shouted, his face flushing crimson. Just like this one, moon witches are mistakes of nature, corruptions of the moon goddess's gifts. They must be destroyed before. Power exploded through the room. Sarah hadn't meant to release it, but Cassian's words had triggered something primal inside her. Crackling, luminous energy erupted from her hands, a visible wave that sent Cassian flying backward into the crowd with a sickening crack. Wolves scattered in panic, some shifting into their wolf forms instinctively, others frozen in terror. Sarah, stop. Kieran's hands gripped her shoulders, his voice in her ear urgent but calm. You're proving their point. Control it. But the power wouldn't stop. It poured out of her like a flood breaking through a dam, responding to her rage and fear and the overwhelming sense that she needed to protect herself. She could feel it reaching for every wolf in the room, invisible threads of energy connecting her to them. She realized with growing horror that she could dominate them all with a single thought. Could make them kneel, make them submit, make them do anything she wanted. The realization terrified her more than anything else. I can't, she gasped, her voice breaking. I don't know how. Kieran spun her to face him, his brilliant eyes blazing with intensity. Look at me. Nothing else. Just me. She focused on his face, on the strong line of his jaw, the concern in his eyes, the mark that connected them pulsing at his throat. Gradually, she felt his presence in her mind, calm and strong and steady, like an anchor in a storm. He was helping her pull the power back inside, teaching her through their bond how to contain it. When the energy finally subsided, the hall was in chaos. Several wolves had fled entirely, their fear overcoming their desire to see justice done. Those who remained looked at Sarah with undisguised terror, and she could feel their emotions battering against her newly opened senses. This is exactly what we feared, Thomas said, his voice shaking as he climbed to his feet. She can't control it. She's a danger to everyone. She's learning, Kieran said firmly, his arm coming around Sarah's waist in a gesture of protection. And she'll have time to learn because she's under my protection. You would risk everything for one female? The Eastern Pack representative demanded. Your entire kingdom? Yes. The simple answer seemed to shock them more than anything else that had happened. Then you've chosen your path, Cassian said, climbing to his feet with blood streaming from his nose and a gash on his forehead where he'd hit the wall. And we've chosen ours. Is that a threat? Commander Riker's hand moved to his weapon. It's a promise, Thomas said, drawing himself up with as much dignity as he could muster. 7 packs stand united in this. The Moon Witch must be surrendered for judgment, or we will consider it an act of war. Kieran rose from his throne, and every wolf in the room took an involuntary step back. His power filled the hall, timeless and absolute, pressing down on them like the weight of centuries. Then let me be perfectly clear, he said, his voice soft but carrying to every corner. Sarah Nightshade is mine. She is under my protection, my law, and my bond. Any wolf who touches her will answer to me personally, and I have had 3 centuries to perfect the art of making examples of those who challenge me. You would fight your own kind? Thomas breathed, horror and disbelief warring on his face. I would burn this world to ash before I let you touch her. Kieran's eyes seemed to glow brighter, more luminous than any wolf's eyes should be. Now get out of my palace, all of you, and when you return to your packs, tell them exactly what happened here today. Tell them the Alpha King has claimed his Moon Witch, and if they want war, they know where to find me. The representatives fled, their footsteps echoing through the hall as they scrambled for the exits. Cassian shot Sarah one last look of pure, burning hatred before disappearing through the doors, and she knew with certainty that this wasn't over. He would never forgive her for this humiliation. When they were finally alone, Sarah's legs gave out. Kieran caught her before she hit the floor, lifting her easily into his arms. "That went well," she said weakly, trying for humor and failing. Despite everything, he laughed. A short, sharp sound. "You just declared war on 7 packs and nearly destroyed my throne room. I'd say it went spectacularly poorly." "I'm sorry." "Don't." He looked down at her, his expression fierce and protective. "Don't apologize for what you are. Don't apologize for your power. If we're going to survive this, you need to own it. Own every part of yourself, including the parts that scare you." He carried her from the hall, Commander Riker falling into step beside them, his face grim. "How long do we have?" Riker asked quietly. "Days at most," Kieran replied, his arms tightening around Sarah. "They'll need time to gather their forces, but they will come. Fear makes wolves do stupid things. And our allies? We have none. Not for this." He glanced down at Sarah, something vulnerable flickering in his expression. "A moon witch and an eternal guard, where every pack's nightmare come to life." Sarah pressed her face against his chest, feeling his heartbeat, their heartbeat now, through their bond. "I'm scared." "Good. Fear will keep you sharp." His arms tightened around her. "But know this, Sarah Nightshade. No matter what comes, I will not let you die for me. Not like Lyanna died for Darius. Whatever future we face it together. Or not at all." He brought her to her quarters and laid her gently on the bed. When he moved to leave, she caught his hand, her fingers wrapping around his wrist. "Stay," she whispered. "Please. I don't want to be alone tonight." Something vulnerable flickered in his eyes. "If I stay, I won't be able to leave. The bond is already too strong. Every moment I spend with you makes it harder to imagine being apart." "Then don't leave." He stood there, clearly warring with himself. Then he kicked off his boots and lay down beside her, pulling her against his chest with a tenderness that made her throat tight. "Just for tonight," he murmured into her hair. "Tomorrow, we prepare for war." Sarah closed her eyes, listening to his heartbeat, feeling the bond pulse between them like a living thing. Tomorrow might bring death and destruction. Tomorrow, the 7 packs would begin gathering their forces to march on the capital. But tonight, wrapped in the arms of her true mate, she felt safer than she'd ever felt in her life. Even if it was an illusion, she would treasure it while it lasted. Sarah woke to find herself alone, but she could still feel the phantom warmth of where Kieran had been. Dawnlight streamed through the windows, painting everything in shades of gold and pink. A note beside the breakfast tray read, "Meet me in the archives. There's something you need to see. K." Despite the early hour, servants and guards moved through the corridors with unusual urgency. News of yesterday's confrontation had clearly spread through the capital like wildfire. Sarah could feel their fear and uncertainty pressing against her senses, still too new and raw for her to block out completely. The archives were in the oldest part of the palace, downstairs that seemed endless. When Sarah finally reached the bottom, she found a vast chamber filled with books and scrolls that smelled of age and magic and secrets long buried. Kieran stood at a table in the center, surrounded by texts that looked older than kingdoms. He looked up when she entered. Disheveled hair, dark circles shadowing his eyes, but fierce determination burning in his expression. "You found it," she said, moving to his side. "I found something." He gestured to an open book, its pages yellowed with age and covered in writing that seemed to shimmer. "This is Lyanna's personal journal. I've never been able to read it before. It was written in a language only moon witches could understand. But this morning, through our bond, I can finally see what she wrote." Sarah leaned over the book and gasped. The words that had been incomprehensible suddenly made perfect sense, as if they'd been written in her native tongue all along. "To the daughter of my bloodline who reads this, I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry for what I'm about to do." but I see no other path forward. The bond between a moon witch and her true mate is meant to be glorious. Two halves of one soul, power multiplied beyond measure. But the world fears what it cannot control. They will come for you as they came for me, and you will have to make the same impossible choice: die together, or live separately in agony. I chose death. Perhaps you will be braver. She knew, Sarah whispered, her fingers hovering over the faded words. She knew her bloodline would continue. Keep reading, Kieran said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. Sarah turned the page and found a detailed account of Lyanna's final days, the 7 packs uniting against her and Darius, the desperate attempts to find peace, and finally, the spell that would change everything, the creation of the Eternal Guard. I've chosen 30 of Darius's most loyal wolves and bound their lives to the moon itself. They will be immortal, unchanging, enduring beyond mortal span. And one of them, the commander who stood beside us until the end, will one day find his own moon witch. The fates have shown me this truth. My death creates a debt that must be repaid. In 3 centuries, when the moon and stars align just as they do tonight, a new moon witch will be born, and she will have the power to rewrite what I could not. Sarah's hands trembled, making the pages flutter. She knew about me, about us. There's more. Kieran flipped to the final page with careful reverence. This is the prophecy she spoke with her dying breath. The words were written in crimson ink, or maybe blood, Sarah realized with a chill, and they seemed to pulse with residual power. When the wolf who has lived 3 centuries meets the witch born under crimson skies, the choice of endings returns once more, together in death, or death of the bond itself. But know this, daughter of my blood, there exists a third path, narrow as a blade's edge. Power demands sacrifice, but sacrifice need not be death. The moon will show you what I could not see. Trust the bond, not the fear, and perhaps you will write a different ending than mine. Sarah read the words 3 times, trying to understand their meaning. A third path. She's saying there's a way for us to survive together? Maybe. Kieran's voice was cautious, careful. Or maybe she was giving you hope in her final moments. Nothing more. The dying often see what they wish to see. You don't believe that. Sarah turned to face him fully. If you did, you wouldn't have spent all night searching through these archives. He cupped her face, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. I want to believe it. For 347 years, I've wanted to believe there's a path forward that doesn't end in death and destruction. But wanting and truth are different things, Sarah. I've learned that lesson too many times. Then we make our own truth. Sarah looked back at the journal, at Lyanna's elegant handwriting. She said the moon will show us. So we ask the moon. How? I don't know yet. But I can feel my power growing stronger every hour we're together. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe I need to fully embrace what I am before I can understand what she meant. Kieran was quiet, his expression troubled. There's a lunar ceremony tomorrow night. The full moon rises at midnight. If you're going to attempt communion with the moon goddess, that would be the ideal time. The veil between worlds is thinnest then. And the 7 packs? Will likely attack soon after. His expression hardened, the warrior emerging. They won't wait long. Fear makes wolves act rashly, and we've given them plenty to fear. Then we need to be ready. Sarah pulled away from him, moving to examine the other texts scattered on the table. What else is here? There must be records of what Lyanna could do, how she trained her powers. Sarah. Kieran caught her arm, turning her back to face him. You need to understand what you're proposing. Using that much power, attempting direct communion with the moon goddess. It could kill you even if we're not attacked. Most moon witches who attempted it died in the process. or it could save us both. You're willing to risk your life on a 3-century-old riddle? Sarah met his luminous eyes steadily, seeing her own determination reflected back at her. I'm willing to risk my life for a chance at a future with you, aren't you? For answer, Kieran pulled her against him, kissing her with a desperation that made her knees weak. The bond between them flared to life, and Sarah felt his emotions crash over her in waves. Fear, hope, love so intense it bordered on pain, and underneath it all, a loneliness so profound it made her want to weep. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kieran pressed his forehead to hers. I've lived for 347 years, he said roughly. I've seen civilizations rise and fall. I've watched everyone I ever cared about grow old and die, while I remained unchanged. And in all that time, I've never been as terrified as I am right now. Because you're the first thing that's made me want to live, rather than just exist. Sarah's throat tightened with emotion. Then let's make sure you get that chance. A sharp knock interrupted them. Commander Riker entered, his face grim. My lord, we have a situation. One of the pack sent a scout. He was caught at the border with this. Riker held up a rolled parchment sealed with 7 different pack marks pressed into red wax. Kieran took it, breaking the seals with sharp movements. As he read, his expression grew darker with each line, his jaw clenching. What does it say? Sarah asked, though part of her didn't want to know. It's an ultimatum. He handed her the parchment, and she saw his hand was trembling slightly. We have until tomorrow at sunset to surrender you for trial. If we refuse, they march on the capital with combined forces. Roughly 5,000 wolves against our 2,000. Those aren't good odds, Riker said quietly, understating the impossible situation. No, Kieran agreed, his voice flat. They're not. Sarah's hands clenched into fists, crumpling the parchment. I won't let you go to war for me. I'll surrender myself. No. Kieran's voice cracked like a whip, echoing through the archive. That's not an option. It's the only option that doesn't get your people killed. You are my people now. He moved to her, gripping her shoulders with enough force that she felt the tremor in his hands. You're my mate, my responsibility, my choice. And I choose to fight. Even if it destroys everything you've built? I've been building this kingdom for 3 centuries, Sarah. It's stone and laws and borders, things that can be rebuilt. His hands moved to frame her face, his touch infinitely gentle despite the intensity of his words. But you? You're the first real thing I've felt in centuries. The first person who's made me remember what it's like to be alive, instead of just existing. I'll burn down everything I've built before I hand you over to wolves who fear what they don't understand. Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks, hot against her skin. I don't deserve that. You deserve everything. He kissed her gently, then turned to Riker with the mask of leadership firmly back in place. Gather the Eternal Guard, all 30 of us. If we're going to war, we go together as we did 3 centuries ago. And the human citizens? Riker asked. Evacuate them. To the southern territories immediately. I won't have civilians caught in this. Kieran's jaw set with determination. This is wolf business. Let's keep it that way. As Riker left to carry out his orders, Sarah turned back to Liana's journal. Tomorrow night, the full moon, the lunar ceremony, and possibly her only chance to find the third path that might save them all. I need to train, she said suddenly, urgency flooding through her. If I'm going to attempt communion with the moon goddess, I need to learn to control my power first. What happened in the throne room can't happen again. Agreed. Kieran gathered several texts, his movements efficient and practiced. These should help. Liana's training records, rituals, everything she documented about Moonwitch abilities. We have until midnight tomorrow. Let's make every moment count. They spent the rest of the day in the archives, Sarah devouring every word while Kieran translated the portions still beyond her understanding. She learned that moon witches could heal with a touch, could sense emotions through pack bonds, and could even manipulate fate itself if they were sufficiently skilled. But every ability came with a cost. The more power they used, the more it consumed them from within. Liana's journal was filled with warnings about the danger of losing yourself to the magic, of becoming a vessel for power rather than its master. The moon's gift is intoxicating, Liana had written in one entry. I can feel it calling to me every night, promising unlimited power if I just surrender to it completely. But Darius reminds me who I am. His love anchors me to this world. Without him, I fear I would become something monstrous, something that would make the pack's fears seem justified. As sunset approached, Kieran insisted they both eat and rest, though neither of them had much appetite. Tomorrow would be brutal. The lunar ceremony at midnight, followed by the pack ultimatum at sunset if they survived. Less than 24 hours to either save them both or watch everything burn. That night, Kieran didn't even pretend he would leave her room. They lay together in the darkness, the bond humming between them like a living thing, neither able to sleep, despite their exhaustion. Tell me about your life before, Sarah said quietly. When you were just you, before the eternal guard, before the centuries of loneliness. Kieran was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer, that she'd pushed too far. Then, I had a mate once, a fated mate, given to me by the moon goddess when I was barely 20 years old. Her name was Mira. His voice was distant, heavy with the weight of 3 centuries of memory. She died in the war, killed by the same packs that came for Liana and Darius. I watched her die in my arms, unable to save her, unable to do anything but hold her, as the light left her eyes. When Liana offered me immortality as part of the Eternal Guard, I took it because I didn't care if I lived or died anymore. I figured 3 centuries of service was a fitting punishment for failing to protect the person I loved most. Sarah's heart clenched painfully. I'm sorry. Don't be. Mira was gone long before I met you. The pain of losing her faded centuries ago became just another memory in an endless collection of them. He turned to face her in the darkness, and she could just make out his features in the moonlight streaming through the window. But I need you to understand something. If this goes wrong tomorrow, if we fail, and I lose you, I won't survive it again. Losing you would break something in me that 3 centuries and all of Liana's magic couldn't heal. Then we won't fail, Sarah said fiercely. She kissed him, pouring every ounce of determination and love into it. We'll find Liana's third path. We'll survive this together. I promise you. She felt him smile against her lips. Don't make promises you can't keep, little witch. I'm a moon witch bonded to an eternal guard, she said, echoing his earlier words with a confidence she was only beginning to feel. I can keep any promise I want. They made love then, slow and desperate and tender, the bond between them blazing like starfire. And when they finally fell asleep tangled together, limbs intertwined and hearts beating in synchronization, Sarah dreamed of the moon, vast and silver and full of secrets that might just save them both, if she was brave enough to claim them. The day of reckoning dawned gray and cold, as if the sky itself mourned what was to come. Sarah stood on the palace balcony, watching the capital's streets empty as the last civilians were evacuated south. Families carried what they could. Children clinging to their parents, elderly wolves being helped onto carts, everyone casting fearful glances back at the only home they'd ever known. This is my fault, she whispered, guilt pressing down on her chest like a physical weight. This is the fault of wolves who choose fear over understanding. Kieran's arms wrapped around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. Don't carry their hatred as your burden. They made their choice long before you came here. Below, the Eternal Guard assembled in the courtyard, 30 wolves who had lived for 3 centuries, who had survived the War of Broken Bonds, now prepared to fight again. For her. For their Alpha King. For a bond that shouldn't exist, but did. Commander Riker says the 7 packs are massing at the northern border. Kieran continued quietly. They'll march at sunset, giving us one last chance to surrender you before they attack. How many? 5,000, maybe more. Word has spread to other packs. Fear is contagious. His arms tightened around her. Some are coming because they truly believe moon witches are too dangerous to exist. Others are coming because they see an opportunity to challenge my authority. Sarah turned in his embrace, studying his face in the gray morning light. Do you regret it? Claiming me as your mate? Never. His hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch infinitely gentle. Even if this ends in fire and blood and the destruction of everything I've built, I'll never regret finding you. You've given me 3 centuries worth of living in just 3 days. Good. She rose on her toes and kissed him softly. Because I intend for it to end very differently than fire and blood. The hours crawled toward a midnight with agonizing slowness. Sarah spent them in meditation, following the exercises described in Leanna's journal, trying to center herself and prepare for communion with the moon goddess, a ritual that had killed weaker moon witches before her. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold that reminded her of blood and fire, horns blew from the watchtowers. The 7 packs had arrived right on schedule. Sarah joined Kieran on the palace walls, looking out at the massive force assembled beyond the capital's borders. 5,000 wolves in human form stood in organized ranks, with thousands more in wolf form prowling at the edges. Their combined power pressed against the city like a physical force, making the air thick and hard to breathe. At the front of the host stood Cassian, Elder Thomas, and the representatives from the other packs. Even from this distance, Sarah could see Cassian's triumphant smile, could feel his hatred burning across the space between them. People of the capital! Thomas's voice, magically amplified to carry across the distance, rang out. We come not as conquerors, but as protectors of the natural order. We seek only one thing, the surrender of the moon witch who threatens us all. Give her up, and no blood need be shed. Refuse, and you stand against 7 packs united in purpose. They're lying, Riker muttered beside Kieran. The moment they have her, they'll use her as leverage to control the capital. You'll be forced to abdicate, and they'll install a puppet king of their choosing. I know. Kieran's expression was carved from stone. But they're offering my people a way out of this. Some will consider it, and I can't blame them for choosing survival. As if summoning his words, murmurs rose from the capital's defenders gathered below. Sarah could feel their fear and doubt pressing against her senses. 2,000 against 5,000. The odds so impossible they might as well be facing an avalanche with a handful of pebbles. My lord, one of the younger wolves called up nervously. Perhaps we should consider their offer. The moon witch isn't worth... No. Kieran's voice cracked like thunder, and power rolled off him in waves that made every wolf within range drop instinctively to one knee. The moon witch is under my protection. That is final, and I will hear no more debate on the matter. But the cost to our people? I said no. The force of his words made the stones beneath their feet tremble. I am your Alpha King. I have led you for 3 centuries, through war and peace, through prosperity and hardship. Trust me now when I say, we will not surrender. Sarah touched his arm, feeling the tension in his muscles, the fear beneath his commanding exterior. Through their bond, she could sense his internal war. Duty to his people versus the bond that connected them like a golden thread. You're afraid, she said quietly, for his ears alone, terrified. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining and squeezing gently. But not of death, of failing you, of watching you die like I watched Mira die, like I watched Leanna die. My life has been one long lesson in loss, Sarah. I don't know if I can survive learning it again. You won't have to. She squeezed his hand back. The moon rises in 3 hours. Let me try the ritual. If Leanna was right, if there's truly a third path, and if there isn't, if you die attempting it, then at least I died fighting for us instead of being slaughtered by them. Sarah turned to face the assembled army below, feeling their fear and hatred wash over her. I'm done letting fear decide my fate. I'm a moon witch. It's time I started acting like one. Midnight approached with agonizing slowness. The 7 packs had lit massive bonfires at their camp, and their howls carried across the distance. A psychological assault meant to break the capital's resolve and remind them of the overwhelming force arrayed against them. Sarah stood in the palace's lunar sanctuary, a circular chamber with a domed glass ceiling open to the night sky. Intricate runes covered the floor in patterns that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them, and at the center was a raised platform where moon witches had once performed their most significant rituals. Kieran stood at the chamber's edge with Riker and the Eternal Guard, ready to defend her if the ritual went wrong, or if the 7 packs decided to attack early. Once you begin, Kieran said, his voice tight with worry, you can't stop. The power will either transform you or consume you. There's no middle ground, no safety net. I understand. Sarah stepped onto the platform, feeling timeless magic thrumming beneath her feet like a heartbeat. If this works, you'll know. And if it doesn't, I'm coming in after you. His brilliant eyes blazed with determination. Bond or no bond, death or no death, I won't let you face the darkness alone. That's my promise to you. Their eyes met across the chamber, and Sarah felt the full weight of their connection. This bond that had appeared without permission, that defied every law of their kind that might destroy them both or save them. It was real. It was worth fighting for. The moon began to rise, massive and full, its silver light pouring through the glass ceiling like liquid magic. Sarah closed her eyes and reached for her power with both hands, holding nothing back. It came like a flood, overwhelming in its intensity. She gasped as magic poured through her veins, radiant, energy that responded to her will. The mark on her throat blazed with light so bright it illuminated the entire chamber, and she felt Kieran's presence through their bond, anchoring her like a lifeline in a storm. "Moon goddess!" she called out, not with her voice but with her power, sending it up toward the sky like a prayer. Lyanna Nightshade promised me a third path. I'm here to claim it. Show me what she couldn't see. Show me how to save us both. The world held its breath. Then everything exploded into silver light so bright it was like staring into the heart of a star. Sarah found herself standing in a place between worlds, where reality bent and twisted according to different rules. The lunar sanctuary was gone, replaced by an endless expanse of silver sand beneath an enormous moon that filled the entire sky. And before her stood a woman made of moonlight itself, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. Sarah Nightshade. The moon goddess's voice was like music and thunder combined, resonating through Sarah's bones. Daughter of Leanna's blood, you dare demand answers from me? I dare ask, Sarah said, forcing her voice to remain steady. Leanna said there was a third path. Show me. The third path is not given freely like a gift. The goddess circled Sarah like a predator studying prey. It is earned through courage and sacrifice. Leanna could have taken it, but she chose martyrdom instead, chose to die rather than face what it required. Will you be braver than your ancestor? Tell me what I need to do. Accept what you are, fully, completely, without reservation or fear or shame. The goddess stopped before her, towering and magnificent. You have been hiding your entire life, Sarah Blackwood. Hiding your power, your nature, your truth, No more half measures. No more making yourself small to comfort others. Claim every part of yourself or be claimed by death. I don't understand. Yes, you do. The goddess's form shifted, and suddenly Sarah was looking at herself, but a version of herself she'd never dared to imagine. Eyes glowing with luminous power that could reshape reality, body radiating confidence and strength like armor, wearing authority like a crown. This is who you could become, a moon witch at full power, bonded to an eternal guard, capable of reshaping fate itself. But to reach this transformation, you must surrender control completely. Surrendering control is what Leanna warned against. She warned against surrendering to the darkness, to the hunger for power. The goddess's form shifted again, now showing Sarah and Kieran together, their powers intertwined like vines growing around each other. I'm asking you to surrender to yourself, to trust your own strength. The bond between a moon witch and her true mate is meant to be symbiotic, perfectly balanced. You give him your magic, he gives you his strength. Together, you become something neither could ever be alone. But it requires absolute trust, absolute vulnerability, absolute faith in each other. Can you do that? Sarah thought of Kieran waiting in the sanctuary, ready to die for her if necessary, of the bond that pulsed between them, growing stronger every moment they spent together, of the life they could have, centuries of life, if she was brave enough to claim it. Yes, she said, her voice ringing with certainty. I can. Then receive my blessing. The moon goddess touched Sarah's forehead with one luminous finger, and power beyond measure flooded into her like a river breaking through a dam. Go forth, moon witch. Show the packs what they should truly fear, not your power, but their own weakness that makes them fear it. Sarah's eyes snapped open in the lunar sanctuary, and the world had fundamentally changed. She could feel every wolf in the capital, their emotions and thoughts and fears laid bare to her newly opened senses, all connected through invisible threads of power that she could see now like silver webs. Beyond the walls, she sensed the 5,000 wolves massing for attack, could feel Cassian's hatred burning like a beacon, and Thomas's fear that maybe they'd made a terrible mistake. And through their bond, she felt Kieran like he was part of her own soul, his presence as familiar as her own heartbeat. Sarah? His voice was awed, reverent. Your eyes, they're glowing. I know. She looked down at her hands, which pulsed with radiant energy that danced between her fingers like living flame. The moon goddess showed me the path. But I need you for the next part. I can't do this alone. What do you need? Everything. She extended her hand toward him across the chamber. Complete trust, complete surrender. Our powers need to merge completely, Kieran. Not just our hearts or our minds, our very essence must become one. She watched understanding dawn in his eyes, followed immediately by fear. That kind of bonding, it's irreversible. If one of us dies, the other dies too. There would be no separation ever again, no independence, no more loneliness, Sarah interrupted softly. No more 3 centuries of watching the world go by while you remain unchanged. No more wondering if you'll ever feel truly alive again. She kept her hand extended, unwavering. I'm asking you to bet 3 centuries of survival on me. On us. I know it's terrifying, but it's not the dying that scares me. Kieran crossed to her in 3 quick strides, taking her hand and pulling her close. It's living. I've been dead inside for so long, Sarah, existing but not truly alive. You're asking me to open myself up completely, to feel everything. Joy, pain, love, loss, all of it at full intensity. After 3 centuries of numbness, that's more frightening than any death. I know, Sarah cupped his face with her free hand, feeling the bond pulse between them. But that's what it means to be alive. Not just existing day after day, but living. Really living. She searched his eyes, seeing her own, hope reflected there. Will you live with me, Kieran? Will you trust me enough to take this leap into the unknown? For answer, he kissed her, deep and claiming and full of 3 centuries of loneliness finally ending. I will, he said against her lips, his voice rough with emotion. I'll trust you. I'll live with you. I'll die with you if I must. But first, let's try to actually survive this. Sarah smiled, fierce and bright and brimming with power. Hold on tight. This is going to hurt. She released the full force of her power, letting it flow from her into Kieran through their bond like a dam breaking. At the same time, she felt his strength pouring into her. 3 centuries of accumulated power, the blessing of Lyanna's final spell, the raw strength of an alpha king who'd survived longer than any wolf should. They both screamed as their essences merged, as every barrier between them shattered and fell away. It was agony and ecstasy combined, every nerve ending on fire as magic rewrote them at a fundamental level. Sarah felt herself expanding, becoming more than she'd ever been, her consciousness stretching to encompass not just herself, but Kieran as well. Simultaneously, she felt him becoming part of her core, his memories and experiences, and 3 centuries of accumulated wisdom flooding into her mind. The mark on her throat blazed like a star, and an identical mark appeared on Kieran's throat. Glimmering runes that pulsed in perfect synchronization with both their heartbeats. When the transformation finally completed, they stood in the center of the lunar sanctuary, hands clasped tightly, both glowing with impossible power that made the air around them shimmer. Around them, the Eternal Guard had dropped to their knees, overwhelmed by the sheer force of what they'd just witnessed. The prophecy was true, Riker breathed, awe and disbelief warring on his scarred face. You found the third path. You actually found it. Sarah looked at Kieran and saw her own wonder reflected in his luminous eyes. Through their bond, now complete and unbreakable, she could feel his thoughts as clearly as her own, could sense his emotions and fears and hopes as if they were hers. His 3 centuries of memories were available to her now, a vast library of experience she could access at will. And for the first time in her entire life, she felt complete, whole, like she'd been living as half a person and only now understood what it meant to be fully alive. Now, Kieran said, his voice resonating with power that made the stones beneath their feet vibrate. Let's show the 7 packs what a true mate bond can do when it's allowed to flourish instead of being destroyed by fear. Together, they turned toward the door, ready to face whatever came next. Together, they were unstoppable. They stood on the palace walls as dawn broke over the capital, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed impossibly beautiful given what was about to happen. 5,000 wolves assembled on the plains below, ready to march, ready to kill. Sarah raised her hand, and crackling energy danced around her fingers like lightning she'd learned to tame. Through her connection to Kieran, she could feel his strength amplifying her own, and vice versa, their powers feeding off each other in a continuous loop. Together, they were more formidable than either could have imagined alone. People of the 7 packs. Sarah's voice, magically amplified to carry across the entire field, rang out. You came here demanding my surrender, demanding I submit to your judgment for the crime of existing, but I am not yours to judge. Kill her! Cassian screamed from the front lines, his face twisted with rage. She's an abomination! Sarah's power lashed out faster than thought, wrapping around Cassian and lifting him off his feet, holding him suspended in the air. I am a moon witch, she said calmly, her voice carrying absolute authority. Blessed by the moon goddess herself. bonded to an eternal guard through a connection you cannot begin to understand, and I am done being afraid of what I am." She could feel the wolves below wavering, their certainty cracking like ice beginning to thaw. "Lyanna Nightshade died because she believed fighting you was the only path forward," Sarah continued, her words ringing with truth. "But she was wrong. There is a third path. One where moon witches don't hide what they are out of fear, where bonds are honored regardless of who the moon goddess chooses, where we don't let fear and hatred dictate how we live." "She speaks heresy," Thomas shouted, but his voice lacked conviction. "The old ways must be preserved." "The old ways killed countless innocents." Kieran stepped forward, his hand finding Sarah's and their fingers intertwining. "3 centuries ago, I watched those old ways destroy the two people I was sworn to serve and protect. I won't stand by and watch it happen again. Sarah and I are bonded, truly, completely, irreversibly. Harm her, and you harm me. And I promise you all, I have had 3 centuries to perfect the art of vengeance." The army shifted uneasily, uncertainty rippling through their ranks like wind through grass. "We outnumber you 5-1, the Eastern Pack representative called out, but there was doubt in his voice. "Your power means nothing against our numbers." Sarah's laugh cut him off, echoing across the field. "You think numbers matter?" She raised both hands, and her power exploded outward in a wave of luminous energy. Every wolf in the army gasped as they suddenly felt her presence in their minds, not controlling them, but connecting with them, letting them feel her emotions and intentions. She could sense their own emotions in return, their fears, their doubts, their secret shame at what they were doing. "I could dominate all of you right now," Sarah said softly, but her voice carried to every wolf through the connection her power had created. "I could make you kneel, make you submit, make you do anything I wanted with just a thought. That's what you fear, isn't it? That's why you want me dead, because you're terrified of what I could do to you." She released her hold gently, and the wolves stumbled back, shocked and terrified by what they'd just experienced. "But I won't," Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger, "because I'm not interested in ruling through fear or dominating those weaker than me. I'm offering you a choice. Put down your weapons. Go home to your families. Let the capital exist in peace. Let me exist in peace." Her eyes blazed with power. "Or learn exactly why moon witches were feared by those who couldn't control them." The world seemed to hold its breath. Then one wolf from the Eastern Pack dropped his weapon. Then another. And another. The sound of swords and spears hitting the ground creating a rhythm like rain. "Stand firm!" Cassian screamed, struggling against the power that still held him. "She's manipulating you." "She's giving us a choice," an older wolf said quietly, his weathered face troubled. "Something you never did, Cassian. You told us this would be an easy victory, that we be heroes for destroying a monster. But she's not a monster. She's just one of us, trying to survive." "Cowards!" Cassian snarled, his face contorted with rage and humiliation. "All of you are cowards." But the army was already fracturing, breaking apart like ice in spring. Wolves were turning away, beginning the long walk home, shame and relief warring on their faces. Within minutes, half the force had abandoned the field entirely. Cassian watched his army dissolve with mounting fury, with the realization that he'd failed completely. Then his eyes locked onto Sarah with such pure, burning hatred that she actually took a step back. "If I can't have you," he snarled, and she felt him gathering his remaining strength, "no one will." He shifted into his wolf form midair as her power released him, a massive brown wolf with amber eyes blazing with madness. He launched himself at the wall with supernatural speed, claws extended, fangs bared and dripping, and slammed into an invisible barrier with a sickening crunch of breaking bones. Sarah had raised a shield without even thinking about it, her power responding automatically to protect her and Kieran. Cassian fell back to the ground 30 feet below, stunned and bleeding from multiple wounds. "Go home, Cassian," Sarah said tiredly, all the fight draining out of her. "You've lost. Accept it with whatever dignity you have left." "Never." He shifted back to human form, his face a mask of blood and fury, one arm hanging at an unnatural angle. "You rejected our bond. You humiliated me in front of everyone I know. You destroyed my entire future. I'd rather die than let you live happily with him." "Then die," Kieran said coldly, his voice carrying absolute finality. Before Cassian could move, Kieran's power struck him like a battering ram. 3 centuries of accumulated strength focused into a single devastating blow. Cassian crumpled to the ground, alive but utterly broken, every major bone shattered, his wolf whimpering pathetically. "Take him," Kieran commanded the remaining pack representatives, his voice brooking no argument. "Take him back to Clearwater and tell them exactly what happened here today. Tell them the Alpha King has claimed his Moon Witch. Tell them we are bonded beyond any ability to separate us. And tell them that anyone who threatens my mate will face me personally, and I have 3 centuries of experience in making examples of those who challenge me." The representatives hurried forward to collect Cassian's broken form, their faces pale with fear. Within another hour, the last of the 7 packs had retreated. Their war ended before it could truly begin, their army scattered by words and mercy rather than violence. As sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Sarah stood in the palace gardens with Kieran, watching the last of the evacuated citizens return to their homes. Children's laughter echoed through the streets once more, and the capital slowly came back to life like a flower opening after a storm. "You did it," Kieran said, his arm around her waist pulling her close. "You found Liana's third path." "We did it," Sarah corrected firmly. "I couldn't have accessed that power without you. We're stronger together than either of us could ever be alone." "I know." He turned her to face him, his expression serious. "Sarah, do you understand what we've become? We're bonded on a level that no other wolves have achieved in centuries, maybe ever. Your thoughts are my thoughts. Your pain is my pain. Your joy is my joy. If you die, if I die, you die too. I know." She cupped his face, feeling the bond pulse between them like a living thing, warm and bright and eternal. "And I wouldn't have it any other way. 3 centuries you've been alone, Kieran, watching the world change while you remained frozen in time. Never again. You'll never be alone again." He kissed her then, deep and claiming and tender all at once, and Sarah felt their merged power sing in response. They were something new now, something the world hadn't seen since Liana and Darius, but stronger, wiser, because they'd learned from those who came before them. When they finally broke apart, Sarah rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Their heartbeat now, through their bond. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now?" Kieran's arms tightened around her protectively. "Now we build something better than what came before. A kingdom where moon witches don't have to hide what they are. Where bonds are honored regardless of who the moon goddess chooses or doesn't choose. Where fear doesn't dictate our laws or our lives." "That sounds like a lot of work." "It does." She heard the smile in his voice. "Good thing we have eternity to do it." Sarah pulled back to look at him in shock, hope blooming in her chest. "What?" "The bonding ritual," Kieran said softly, wonder coloring his words. "When our essences merged completely, you didn't just gain my strength and my memories. You gained my immortality. The blessing Liana gave me 3 centuries ago to create the eternal guard is now yours too. We're both immortal now, for as long as we choose to live." Sarah's hand flew to her throat, feeling the mark that pulsed with unnatural life. I'm Immortal? We both are. Kieran's expression was tender, full of a love so profound it made her throat tight. The moon goddess's final gift. A third path where neither of us has to die, where neither of us has to sacrifice ourselves for the other, where we can build the future Leanna dreamed of, together, for as long as it takes. Centuries, if we need them. Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks, not from sadness, but from overwhelming joy so intense it felt like her heart might burst. She'd rejected her fated mate thinking it meant being alone forever, meant choosing herself over any chance at love. Instead, she'd found her true mate, claimed her power, and gained eternity to explore both. "I love you," she whispered, the words finally spoken aloud. "I should have said it before, but I was afraid." "I know." Kieran kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips with infinite tenderness. "I could feel it through our bond every moment, just as you can feel that I've loved you since the instant I saw you in that clearing, defying your entire pack, choosing yourself over their expectations. You were magnificent then, and you're magnificent now. I was terrified. You were brave. There's a difference." He took her hand, intertwining their fingers in a gesture that felt like a promise. "Come, let's go inside. Tomorrow we'll start building our new world, start changing laws and challenging traditions. But tonight," his eyes blazed with heat that made her cheeks flush, "tonight, I want to celebrate our bond properly. No interruptions, no wars, no prophecies. Just you and me, and eternity, stretching out before us like an open road." Sarah's cheeks flushed, but she let him lead her back toward the palace, her heart full to bursting with more happiness than she'd ever imagined possible. She'd rejected her fated mate and woken marked by an alpha king. She'd discovered she was a moon witch, the first in 3 centuries. She'd faced an army and found a third path that no one thought existed. She'd merged her very soul with her true mate's and gained immortality in the process. But most importantly, she'd learned that sometimes the bonds we choose for ourselves are infinitely stronger than the ones fate tries to force upon us. That love, built on trust and choice and mutual respect, is more enduring than any tradition or law. That being true to yourself, no matter how frightening, is the only path to real happiness. And as the moon rose over the capital, bathing everything in silver light that seemed to bless, their union, Sarah Nightshade, Moon Witch, true mate, and future queen, walked into her new life with her head held high and her hand clasped firmly in Kieran's. Together, they would reshape the world according to their own vision. Together, they would prove that love could conquer fear. And they had all of eternity to prove it.